meeting open for you.
Sorry, man. Sorry about that.
Y'all ready?
Interesting.
You guys ready to start?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, it's 5 o'clock. Let's go ahead and bring the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. I'd like to ask Councilmember Kim Howard if she'll lead us in the pledge of invocation, please.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight to thank you for the privilege to be here in a city where we can make decisions for those citizens who have elected us. We thank you for the beautiful weather that we have and the wonderful temperatures so that everyone wants to get outside. We've been locked up for so long. It's just so wonderful and gracious of you to provide this opportunity for us. Please be with us tonight as we do the business of the city. Help us to be wise and make decisions that will be honoring you. In your heavenly name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, council, thank you. Have the minutes of the regular city council meeting of April 5th. John, a chance to review those?
Move to approve the minutes
Second.
of April 5th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, at this time, we'll open it up for citizen comments. Does anybody have any comments on any of the business to be discussed this evening? Okay, if not, we will move to the consent agenda. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion without discussion unless a council member or citizen requests a specific item be discussed and voted on separately. The consent agenda includes items E8, E9, and F2. Would anybody like to be separated for any reason?
Move to approve the consent as written.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve consent. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. All right, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Linda, you'll read D1 first, please.
Ordinance 6375, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Sherman, Texas limited tax notes, Series 2021, specifying the terms and features of such notes, levying a continuing direct annual ad valorem tax for the payment of such notes, and resolving other matters incident and related thereto, including the approval and execution of a paying agent registrar agreement and the approval and distribution of an official statement and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Linda. Mary? I notice Mr. Kimball is here this evening. Welcome, Karen.
This morning, the city sold our bond issue, our latest certificate of obligation, and also some limited tax notes as budgeted. And here we have Gary Kimball from Specialized Public Finance, our financial advisor, to tell us about the results of the bid this morning.
Thank you, Mary. Members of the council, Mayor, good evening. Very pleased to report that you were the only game in town in the Texas market today, and so you had the spotlight all to yourself. And with your strong AA bond rating, which was affirmed by Standard & Poor's just last week, I'm very pleased to report that for both deals, we had a very strong turnout. I'll start with the limited tax notes. We had 8 bidders. The winning bid was submitted by Huntington Securities. This is a 5-year obligation with a true interest cost of 0.33%. That's about as close to free money as you're going to get. And I've been doing this 28 years. I don't think I've ever read off a rate that low for a deal like this. So that's just extremely strong. The 29 million and some change combination tax and revenue certificate of obligation issue drew 7 bidders. BOK Financial Securities in Dallas submitted the low bid. True interest cost of 2.077%. When we resize the payment structure to make them level each year, the TIC actually dropped to 2.05%. So that's the rate that you'll have locked in for the 30-year term on this particular offering. Both of these results are very good. We've been watching rates pull back since about 6 weeks ago. We saw a pretty significant spike in interest rates, but we were hopeful, and it played out that was a bit of an overreaction. So rates have been coming our direction for the past 2 weeks, and we're benefiting from a general lack of municipal bond supply in the market. Beginning about 3 weeks ago, supply dropped to about a half of its normal weekly level, and it's still there. So people were scrambling to try to get some of these bonds. They're, again, high quality because you've got that AA bond rating, and we would recommend approval by the council, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone here to address this item this evening? If not, Linda, will you read D2 for us, please?
Ordinance 6376, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Sherman, Texas combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2021, specifying the terms and features of said certificates, providing for the payment of said certificates of obligation of the levy of an ad valorem tax upon all taxable property within the city, and a limited pledge of the net revenues from the operation of the city's waterworks and sewer system, resolving other matters incident and related to the issuance, payment, security, sale, and delivery of said certificates, including the approval and execution of a paying agent registrar agreement and the approval and distribution of an official statement, and providing an effective date.
These are the certificates of obligation that Gary just spoke about a minute ago, so there's no additional information on this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anybody here to address these items this evening? Okay, if not, we'll close the public hearing and consider the adoption of ordinances. Council, questions, comments?
I have a question about the $30 million shipment obligation series. Our form here says $29,025,000. Just curiosity has me wondering why that's not an even 30.
No, it's actually a very good question. Comes up a lot. In the bid specs, we allow the bidders to bid premium or discount bonds at their choosing. And in this case, they bid premium bonds. The winner did. We then go through a calculation to determine what the true interest cost is based on how they submitted their bid. But when they do that, the coupons are a bit higher than the yields, which forces the purchaser to deliver cash at closing. And that cash makes up the difference between the $30 million that you're authorized to sell per the notice that the council approved a couple of months ago, and the actual par amount, which is $29.025 million. You'll still be getting $30 million worth of proceeds. It's just that the form of the bid that was submitted causes the par amount to be somewhat smaller than the proceeds that are delivered. Okay. Thank you.
That's a pretty good deal when you can get 30 in cash and only have to pay back 29 of it. But that has to do with this rate thing, right, that he just described.
I'll move to approve. Did you have a question?
Nope.
Okay, I'll move to approve or adopt 6375 and 6376.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. We are. Okay, if you could read E1 for us, please.
Resolution 6727, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman authorizing execution of the First Amendment to the Bel Air Village Master Development Agreement with Terra Perpetua LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, amending the terms and conditions of the Bel Air Village Master Development Agreement dated December 18, 2020, and approved by resolution number 6676. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. Robert?
Okay, council, this is this item relates to the work that is about to begin on the Bel Air project. So as Linda read, a few months ago, we brought the master development agreement for council approval, and that happened in December. Since that time, staff and the developer and his team have been working on finalizing the engineering plans, et cetera, et cetera. And so what this resolution relates to is authorizing the developer to do the city's portion of infrastructure improvements while his development team is also doing his portion. And we'll talk about his portion in E2. But the effect is there's about $2 million in city-related infrastructure, including the water line along 1417, that we would be asking the developer to do while he's out there scratching around in the dirt doing his own. And then we would just simply reimburse him for that. So the form that it took, instead of having a separate development and reimbursement agreement, is just simply a modification of the master development agreement that you passed in December. Since we'd already taken a bite of the apple there, we thought it'd be clean to just modify the terms of that master development agreement to allow for us to engage the developer to do these things for us. And I think that is, we had estimated initially our costs of those portions of the project to be considerably higher than they came in. So we feel like for two main reasons it makes sense. One, the pricing came in very good and will be finalized in the coming days when the developer gets his final bids in from his subs. And then secondly, having one developer in charge of the entire project will allow the city and the developer jointly to manage any issues that might come up, because otherwise we would be having our developers, if there were an issue that came up, our contractors, we would be going to them, and then they may have to go to the other side to say, hey, you know, we've got an issue here. So having just one fail swoop of a contractor or subcontractor to go to will make the process much easier for us to manage as well. So we would ask you guys to consider this as well. I would also say that both Ryan with Abernathy and then Chris Carney, who's here as well, worked together along with the developer's attorneys on both E1 and E2, so they could deep dive as much as you wanted to on other aspects of this if you have questions.
I have a couple questions for you, Robbie, just for clarifying purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that there were a few items that somewhat changed in this modification. Obviously, it's a modification. Some of it was scope of work, changing our obligation from a two-lane road for a certain length of distance down to a 4-lane road. Over what appeared to me to increase our scope of work by about 30% on the road. And I'm just trying to wrap my mind around, was that intentional? And then in addition to that, I'm just kind of curious about the 20-inch water line. I believe we passed that a few meetings back on the city side of things as far as our cost on that.
Sure.
If we look, the way the agreement's written, I may be wrong. I just glanced over it, but it looks like our cost isn't to exceed 30% of the overall $9.1 million to a total of about $11 point some odd million. That water line is now included in phase 1 where it wasn't included before. And so that may obligate us to an expedited timeline on our side for the water line, which we probably want to do anyways.
Right.
But also, now that seemed to me to create a problem with this staying under the 30% threshold, because I think that water line was like $3 million.
Right. Yeah, no, those are all excellent questions. So kind of in reverse order. So the 30% cap is a statutory cap, state cap, that says, hey, we can allow others to act on our behalf, in this case the developer, to do up to a project that would include up to 30% that would normally be ours. And that's what we're talking about in this case, both the road and the water line. So if you take the total project of, call it $11 million, right? $2 million on our side and $9 million rounded on his, that's $11 million. So the statute would say that we could not have our portion be any more than $3.3 million, 11 million times the 30%. Well, our portion is 2 million or 2 point, whatever it comes out to be, low 2 millions. So we're well within that 30% threshold set by the state on that. So that's issue one. Issue two is, yes, we were planning all along at some point to do the water line expansion that we're talking about and contemplating here. It was kind of off book, so it was a separate, like a utility CIP project. But it makes a whole lot of sense since they're going to have their equipment mobilized and their guys out there, contractors out there already moving dirt, for them to actually do the work themselves and us just reimburse them for that. So yeah, the original portion of the water line wasn't in their project. It was off books on our project. So we were doing it anyway, just not part of this agreement. But to clean it up and to allow them to do it on our behalf, it had to become part of this agreement. And so we were just going to reimburse them through that way anyway. Our estimates for that project back in the day was somewhere close to $500,000. And they came in at about $400,000, and they have two estimates right now, one for a little less, one for a little more. They'll qualify their bids and do all that. So we've already started seeing savings just in mobilization costs and things like that that make this a good deal for us. I think the third issue you brought up was related to the road. So back in the fall when we were contemplating our portion of this, we weren't anywhere close to having final plans, engineered plans on the site, on their phase one. All we knew at the time was, hey, they're not going to develop this whole 280-acre tract all in one time. They're going to do it in phases. And we'll start and do a little bit on phase one when they start and do in phase one, right? And then when phase two comes around, we'll do some as they do some. So at the time, November, December, we didn't know what the engineered plans were going to call for, where the lines were going to be drawn, how many houses exactly were going to be part of phase one. And so as we got deeper into the engineering of it, we knew that just from an engineering and a construction standpoint, there was going to need to be at least a minimum amount of 4 lanes that was started at 1417 and worked its way south, just from a transition standpoint, much like we did at Moore Street at West Travis. You know how by the high school we don't just have 2 lanes coming down there; we have 4 lanes, and then it tapers down into 2. Same concept there. So there was some distance that we were going to need 4 lanes anyway. So when we got to discussing with the engineers on our side and engineers on their side, all the engineers said, hey, since we're really just talking about phase one here, there's a really good kind of delineation that would make sense for us to just do all 4 lanes for a shorter distance than we were originally contemplating doing 2 lanes, right? So it just made sense from an engineering and construction standpoint to, instead of doing 4 lanes for some stretch and then down to 2 lanes for another stretch, for us to do 4 lanes for a shorter stretch. The dollars were less, and it made more sense from an engineering standpoint. It worked well from a developer standpoint. So it just kind of, as things became more clear on design, it just came to be the best path forward. So
You're saying it was cheaper to do? You said the dollars were less.
yeah, it's cheaper. The way that we're proposing to do it with combining resources, it is cheaper than doing it individually. Us doing our part, them doing their part.
So the 1,150 of 4 lanes is cheaper than the 1,700 of 2 lane.
Yeah. So when you include that and the water line and package them all together, we were looking at, $2.5 to $3 million was going to be our cost in doing all of that. And now it looks to be about $2 million to do all of that, that they need done and that makes sense. So we're doing as much concrete work and pipeline work and all that, the drainage, as we would have otherwise needed to do under what was very preliminary engineering plans at the time. And now we're doing the same amount. I mean, it looks slightly different in terms of the, how it's designed, but we're doing roughly the same amount of work, maybe slightly a little bit more work for less money because it makes sense from an engineering and a dollars and cents standpoint.
So basically more road because of the savings of partnering with them. Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
So the question I had about the water line, I guess maybe I misunderstood which 20-inch line this was. So we did a request for advertisement, I don't know, a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And the estimated cost was like $3.5 million. That may have been a longer stretch than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so we're doing what we would call phase one of a 20-inch water line replacement that's going to be in several segments. And so this phase one that we're talking about is on the part that's going to be otherwise would be in the developer's way if we were in there scratching around in the dirt while they're scratching around in the dirt.
Yeah, the $3 million number you might have pulled when we did the approval for the design contract. We went ahead and hired an engineer, not for $3 million, but we hired them to do design from 75 all the way to the railroad tracks.
Right.
But then the construction side of it was going to be set up in phases based on how the development phased out.
This is the first $500,000 of a possible $3 million project.
Yep.
Correct.
So it's safe to say through all this 47 pages here, your 8-minute explanation.
Detailed, right?
The money's the same.
The money's less, but yes, no more than, yeah.
Okay, but it's not more than, and I think that's where we were all headed with that. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, it shakes out this amount of money that we obligated and agreed to pay.
Yeah, we have a better design project that's easier to manage for less money.
Move to approve.
Second.
Yeah.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Linda, if you'll read E2 for us, please.
Resolution 6728, a resolution of the City of Sherman determining the cost of Phase 1 district improvements to be financed by the Bel Air Village Public Improvement District, approving a preliminary service plan and assessment plan, including proposed Phase 1 assessment roll for the Bel Air Village Public Improvement District, directing the filing of the proposed Phase 1 assessment roll with the City Secretary, calling a regular meeting and noticing a public hearing for May 3rd, 2021 to consider an ordinance levying assessments on property located within the Bel Air Village Public Improvement District, directing the filing of the proposed Phase 1 assessment roll with the City Secretary to make available for public inspection, directing city staff to publish and mail notice of said public hearing, and resolving other matters incident and related thereto.
Okay, so this is kind of part two of the discussion that we just had on the development costs. So this cost, or this resolution relates to the developer side, right? The E1 was our side. E2 is the developer side that's going to be paid for through a couple of ways. One is through this public improvement district that has already been set up and approved by council, and that part of that plan is review of this preliminary service and assessment plan, which I'll hand over to Abdi in just a second. You'll also remember that back in the fall, we appointed MuniCap as the city's advisor and consultant on this PID. And so Abdi's here because he's been working diligently between the city and developer to put together this service and assessment plan. So this is the next step in the process to ultimately approve the service and assessment plan, which will be done at a future council meeting. That's one. And then two, this resolution sets the public hearing date for May 3rd, which is our next council meeting, to consider the ordinance that would actually levy the assessments on the property owners for this project. This portion represents about $9 million. So remember, E1 was our portion. That's about $2 million-ish. E2 is about $9 million in costs. That's on the developer side that will be paid for through either the assessments or out of the developers' pockets. And so that's kind of the tee up to it, but I wanted to let Abdi speak to more of it and describe the process, and then let you guys grill him on it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Abdi Yassin. I'm with Unicap. We're your Public Improvement District assessment consultants and administrators. City Manager Robbie just mentioned, we've been working with city staff and the developer team to basically put together the its governing document, so the document that we've prepared and presented before you for your consideration tonight. It's considered the critical document when it comes to a public improvement district because literally everything about the public improvement district is captured in that document. And as the city manager just mentioned, this is the second of 3 steps in the overall PID process. The first process was creating the district, which you all did back in March. So the second phase of that process is basically setting the final levy date, which would be in March. So the second phase of that PID creation and assessment levy process is considering this preliminary service and assessment plan that we've prepared and presented before you. I'm hoping you had a chance to look at the document. I know it's not too shabby, it's about, I don't know, about 50, 60 pages. But what I'll try to do is try to kind of synthesize the core parts of that document. This document was prepared in collaboration between the city and the developer team. We worked with the city and then the developer engineering team to make sure that each and everything that the developer has presented for qualification as a PID authorized improvement was vetted by the city, and then we made sure that the costs were reasonable, and then what was included in there was consistent with what was allowed to be financed through the Public Improvement District Act, which is the PID Act. And then based on that, we prepared the service and assessment plan. And then the first part of that plan is some general kind of lawyer talk, defined terms. The second section talks about the proposed development, essentially in this particular public improvement district. There's a potential to develop up to about 945 lots or 945 homes, of which 327 will be in phase 1. So this first phase of development that is contemplated, that is going to be underway hopefully pretty soon, covers about 327 lots. So the assessment that is going to be left, that we're asking council to consider tonight and then set the public hearing for the May meeting, is for 327 lots. And the composition of those lots are in table A on page 10, about 98 25-foot lots, about 124 40-foot lots, and about 105 50-foot lots. The costs that qualify to be reimbursed under a public improvement district for this particular phase are about $9,060,000, of which the assessment level that is contemplated to be put on the property that are eventually going to be developed there would allow financing up to about $7.168 million in assessment. So of the $9 million in costs, only about $7,168,000 will be financed through the PID. Because financing, although $9 million costs are eligible to be financed through the PID, financing that full amount would have resulted in too much of a burden, relatively speaking, on the property owners that are coming in. So the developer will be picking up about $1.892 million of that $9 million in cost. Ultimately, those will be paid through other financing structures. But as far as the PID is concerned, the assessment that is going to be levied on phase 1 of the properties within the PID will be about $7,168,000. So it covers about $7,168,000 out of the $9 million in cost. That's on page 27 of that document, table 2B. The other relevant sections of this document are mostly captured towards the end, particularly in Appendix D, which talks about the assessment on the several, the different property classes. And in this document, we've put together and kind of summarize the assessment methodology as to how properties are going to be assessed going forward. Right now, a majority of the assessment will be plotted on larger tracts, but as lots are subdivided, as plats are recorded, those assessments will be allocated to each and every individual lot that's going to be in phase 1. So we've put the methodology ahead of, kind of basically up front. So going forward, it will be a mechanical process in on setting the assessment, and so that way we don't have to come back and ask council to do the allocation every time. So that methodology is already captured in here. Going into the numbers in Appendix D, towards the end of it, basically is Table D7 is basically the core of everything that is going to be done as far as the bid is concerned. That $7,168,000 that I mentioned earlier, that's going to be financed through the PID, will be allocated to the 327 lots, and then that will result in about $26,669 or $26,670 allocated to the 50-foot lots. About $22,225 will be allocated to each 40-foot lot. About $16,446 will be allocated to each 25-foot lot. And another very helpful information that we've included is towards the end of that document, the last 3 pages of the document. Basically, give you an idea as to what a particular property owner that is moving into the PID can expect to pay every year. So one of the advantages of having a PID as opposed to other assessment structures or other special district structures is that it allows the city to be able to basically kind of formulate and highlight exactly what's anticipated to happen. So property owners that are buying into the PID will be able to be provided with this document that shows the detail of exactly what they can expect to pay every year throughout the duration of the PID. So there is a lot of transparency in the process, and to that effect, we've included basically an amortization schedule of what each property owner in each class of the 50s, 40s, and 25 foot class of property owners can anticipate to pay every year during the duration of the PID. Again, a PID as a structure allows them to basically wait it out and pay the assessments over the 30 years and give them this amount. Or it also allows them to pay us the principal amount that's shown in the first column. So there's a lot of flexibility built in. So one of the things that we emphasized was making sure that flexibility is properly reflected in this document. I hope you all had a chance to look at the document, but if you all have any questions,
Hey, Abdi, let me just clarify a couple of things. So amongst the other things that this does, this sets the methodology for how future phases will be administered, right? So for phase 2, the developer will have to come back and say, hey, we want phase 2 to be X, Y, Z, so many lots of so much size, et cetera. So there will be future actions by the council needed for future phases, but the heavy lifting of the methodology is included in what's here tonight, right?
that is correct.
Okay, so although I don't know if the next thing will be 50 or 60 pages long, but in terms of just the heavy lifting, a lot of work's been put in up front, so in however long it is, 12, 24, 36 months when developer's ready for phase 2, we would be back before you again, explaining, the nuts and bolts of it, but without having to go through as much detail on the work that you guys went through to get through the actual methodology. So this won't be the last time you see Abdi. In fact, annually we'll be looking at these as well. So Abdi is engaged by the city, paid by the PID. And so, but he'll be back again annually, and then as needed for future phases of the PID itself.
Council, questions?
So just for instance, in your appendix E2 on the 50-foot lot, in year 1, the annual installment is $23.59.
Yes.
So then they would be paying that on either an annual or a monthly basis, and monthly basis would be about an additional $196.
Those amounts actually will be collected by the tax collector.
Tax
along with the
collector,
other
but
taxes.
that
It'll
would be an
annual amount.
additional tax, let's call it, that
Yeah,
they would pay
yeah.
on a monthly basis. And you mentioned that they could pay that all at once?
Yes, they can. Or they can also partially pay that. So on a 50-foot property, the total assessment, the principal component is about $26,670. So property owner has 3 choices. They can pay off that $26,670 day 1, and they can avoid paying the interest and administrative expenses. Or they can wait it out and pay whatever is outstanding in any given year during the 30 years, or they can pay the annual payments that are shown in there.
Thank you.
And this will show up on your tax bill, just like you get your tax bill that says Sherman ISD, City of Sherman, Grayson County. It'll be, for those that live in here, it'll be Bel Air, whatever this is called, Bel Air bid, X amount, 20, for a 50-foot lot, $2,359.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm sure it probably isn't in here, because I'm sure there's a lot of options on this, but funding sources for the PIDs and the bonds, if they go out for bond, that's something that, obviously the tax values don't hit for a year or two down the line. So who's responsible for those bond payments until, is it the developer is, until the tax values actually hit the rolls?
In this particular structure, actually, bonds are not contemplated, so this is meant to be a reimbursement structure. So whatever property owner owns a lot, be it the developer, a builder, or the individual property owner, they're responsible for paying the PID assessment when the tax bill comes out.
Okay. So in this case, the developer's funding all the project, and they're going to reimburse him over time?
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Any other questions, council? We get a motion?
Make a motion, we approve resolution 6728.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Mayor,
council.
who was the second? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abby.
Okay, Linda, if you'll read E3 for us, please.
Resolution 6729, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman in support of Health Associates Incorporated of its application on behalf of the applicant, Texas Instruments Incorporated, to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for a municipal setting designation at 6412 U.S. Highway 75 South, Sherman, Grayson County, Texas. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda. Wayne, good evening.
Evening, Mayor, Council. So on December 28th, we received the city's second application for municipal setting designation from HAP Associates on behalf of Texas Instruments. Our first one, if you recall, was for Prisco. Just a reminder, the intent of such an application is to provide data, to the city, show that the groundwater contamination from past activities is either safe at safe levels and or contained, not a threat to potable wells or aquifers. We hired Friesen Nichols to assist us with the review of this application. As of March 31st, we received everything from HAP and TI such that we are comfortable with supporting their recommendation to their application with TCEQ for this MSD. We do have reps here this evening from Friesen Nichols, TI, and HAP Associates if you have any specific questions on this application.
I have a question on something you just said. The city hired someone to go over this application?
To assist us with the review of this application. It's a technical book.
What was that fee?
It was slightly under the fee that we collected for the application.
Okay, because I was just going to say, why would we pay that? Thank you.
That's why we have a $5,000 application fee.
You knew where I was going.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
How long was that facility in use? How long was that facility in use?
It's been there since the 60s, early 60s.
Still is. Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah.
Down, but it's still.
Yeah.
Are we anticipating
That's what-
anybody else other than Presco and TI? I don't know if there's anybody else eligible or might be eligible. I'm just asking for
I've
information.
not heard anything in the winds.
Yeah, we've not had any other conversations or applications or anything else, so these were the only two that were on our radar.
I think TI wanted to do this years ago, so.
Okay.
And do they have any plans to use the soil there behind their building, or is this just to try to get it a little bit more up to par? Okay, fair enough. Yep. Very good.
Move to approve.
Second.
Couple of seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, Linda, if you'll read E4 for us, please.
Resolution 6730, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman approving the Greater Texoma Utility Authority's intention to contract with Hayes Construction LLC for the construction of the North Travis Street water line replacement and new US 75 water line crossing project. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed is noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Member Tom. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. We've opened bids on the North Travis Street water line and Choctaw Creek Crossing. We have 6 responsible bidders, the low being submitted by Hayes Construction. They're out of Murphy, Texas. The project consists of 2,700 linear feet of replacement 12-inch along North Travis Street and a new 12-inch waterline bore crossing at Choctaw Creek. The estimated cost for this project at our March 1st council meeting was $760,000 estimate. The low bidder has been verified capable for this project and has a low bid of $473,839. With council approval, the contractor will have 270 days to complete this project.
How many days?
270.
Any questions, council?
I'll move to approve Resolution 6730 if no one has questions.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you.
Linda, I sat out on that vote. I abstained.
Under budget, and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Yep, that's better.
That's
It's under budget,
Like to see
I
that.
agree, but
That's what I thought.
even the engineer calls out that he's concerned about the low bidding being so much, so it'll be interesting to see how this one shakes out.
Okay, thank you.
Change
Good
orders.
news. Linda, you're
He'll
reading
change
the
his
price.
coming.
Resolution 6731, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with Lockwood Andrews and Newnem Incorporated for engineering services for the water treatment plant concentrate line Phase 2 environmental clearance and route study. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
With council approval of this agenda item, we will hire land engineering to move forward to isolate the optimal discharge point of the water treatment plant concentrate. This process requires approval from state and federal agencies such as U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps of Engineers, Texas Department of Transportation, to name a few hurdles that must be overcome. Those are going to be requirements for the discharge permit to be initiated, which is a part of this project as well. The engineering portion of this project is expected to take approximately 3.5 months, and the permitting process another 6.5 months. Hopefully we'll be able to move to design phase sometime in April or May of next year.
So let me add a little bit of color here as well. So while it seems like this one's a relatively small project, the impact is actually huge for 2 or 3 reasons. One, there's been a project contemplated by the city to have to take this brine discharge ultimately to the Red River, which would be via a path east of Denison and discharge directly into the Red River. 8, 9, 10 miles of line was going to be a $40, $50 million project. So our engineering staff, working with LAN, Lockwood Andrews, Newnem, not Newman, Newnem, actually, started this discussion about being able to discharge into this waterway instead of not only not piping it 8 or 9 miles, but being able to limit the amount of piping that may otherwise be needed. So it's important for one that I think by doing so we will avoid tens of millions of dollars in project costs, which is not small. I have plans for that, so I mean we'll talk about that later. But that's significant. Number 2, this project with the brine concentrate that's currently headed south, it actually goes through the middle of one of our planned developments that's under consideration and under development right now. And so this brine disposal issue is affecting a lot of things going on, particularly in the north side of town. and ultimately for the entire city, but it's having a direct impact because of the location of the current brine disposal on one of our projects that we're going to have to figure out how to work through, work around, et cetera. So this is a significant step in getting some closure and a plan on how to dispose of this. And I think Tom mentioned it, but our preliminary, when I say our, Land's preliminary, along with our engineers, conversations with TCEQ have been very positive. They've been very open to it and kind of given us, not approval, we don't have approval yet, but they've been favorable, I guess, in our discussion, TCEQ, in our discussions about this possibility. So this is going to be fantastic when we're able to get this approval done, and which we would hope, again, maybe by the end of this calendar year or first part of next year sometime. TCEQ, although has been kind of slow, as have many other governmental functions. So Land will be done with theirs in a few months, but then however long it takes TCEQ will be to be determined. We do have the option of engaging our state representative and senators if the process starts to take too long. But we don't start there. We work through the channels first to see if we can get that done quickly. So big project, very impactful to the city.
Glenn is estimating it's 6.5 months for TCEQ.
Write it down.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Tom. Linda, if you'll read E6 for us, please.
Resolution 6732, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with Freeman Milliken Incorporated for engineering services for the wastewater treatment plant and lift stations backup power study. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda.
With council approval, the engineering department will enter contract with Freeman Milliken Engineers to evaluate our wastewater treatment plant electrical system for an emergency backup power source in the event of another power failure. Similar to the last council meeting where we talked about the water system. This one's for the sewer system. Given the configuration of the existing plant electrical system, it was agreed that an in-depth investigation to determine the optimal generator configuration is provided. This task will also look at lift stations in the city that does not have a generator. There are 12 of those. It will be used to determine wiring changes necessary at each of those sites so that we can put the generator up to those. Then to complete this portion of engineering, the previously proposed switchgear will be included in this proposal. That was part of last year's CIP. So it's kind of a three-pronged path. Y'all have any questions?
What's the timeline to get the report back? Do you have it estimated in there?
He did not give me a time. No, sir. And that's part of this study is because they're going to figure that kind of stuff out. They know there's a great sense of urgency.
Yeah, we hope this summer we don't have any.
The power, did it actually go out at the sewer plant?
It did not. I saw a notice the other day, though, that they were almost to go out again because a lot of power plants were down for maintenance.
Yes,
it was a nice warm day.
Mm-hmm.
We, to answer whoever's question that was, there actually is a term in here in Article 3 to be completed by August 15th.
Oh, thank you. You're right. Yes, 8-1. My bad.
Right at the end of the summer.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Linda, if you'll read E7 for us.
Resolution 6733, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sherman authorizing the execution of professional services agreement with Freeman Milliken Incorporated for engineering services for the Sherman Laboratory Services Building addition and remodel. Finding that the meeting at which this resolution is passed was noticed and is open to the public as required by law.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. Authorization of this agenda item will initiate procurement of architectural service for the wastewater treatment plant laboratory building and renovation. Originally, on the 2021 CIP budget at $250,000. For services, the engineers cited $197,000, so they're just under the engineering budget. Design should be completed in about 6 months, ready to advertise in next year's CIP funds. Construction is typically 8 to 10 months after that for the project to be completed in October 2022 or January 2023. Work will result in expanded lab facility and remodeled interior areas, new electrical services, a better ability to meet TCEQ standards and testing requirements, new ventilation systems, improving worker safety, new pure water and vacuum systems, new staff work areas, and additional file storage areas.
What's the, I know that's what these people are gonna tell us, but what are we thinking the ultimate cost of that project is gonna be?
Right now, the estimate for the construction cost, $1.35 million. There's quite a bit of building renovation.
You know, every time you come before us, it's 100,000 or better. You realize that? I mean, just saying. This, just to go out and tell us what we need, again, we're gonna spend $200,000.
Do we get it? Do we get
If
it?
it's less than 50, then we don't have to come to y'all.
I know, right? But you don't have to double it to get
If we do
here.
6, do we get a discount? Or-
Yeah, no kidding. My goodness.
My
Let's put these guys on the
goodness.
payroll, man.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
we just hire them? Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye. Thank you all.
Nobody opposed?
Bye, Tom. I don't wanna see you again for a while.
Motion carries, thank you. All right, at this time,
I'm stuck in there.
we're to receive a quarterly progress report from Sherman Economic Development Corporation President Sean Kemp.
All right, Ken.
Welcome this evening.
Come on
Glad you could
down.
join us tonight.
Thank you. I want to make sure we got through all those resolutions.
You got one up your sleeve you want?
No, not tonight.
You got a report you want done or engineering study or?
No, I'm going to get through this because I know you guys are ready to get rid of me. So Mayor, Council, Kent Sharp and Sedco, thank y'all for letting us come and present our report from the quarter from January through March, be our second quarter of the fiscal year. Just to hit some highlights because I know the council's been provided with a copy of the report ahead of time, so I won't go through every one of these. But a couple of the highlights, Sedco approved a couple of resolutions during that quarter. Sedco 2021-01, and that authorized us to buy some more property out south of town. It was approximately 115 acres. The tract was actually sort of southeast and south of where Emerson is. It was a larger 115-acre tract that was owned by a private family. We were contacted and we negotiated a price that we felt very good about acquiring that property. So it's contiguous to the Emerson property. It is divided right now into 2 tracts with a railroad easement that is currently owned by Emerson. IBM had put a railroad spur in there years ago, but that rail spur's been abandoned. The easement is still there, so we'll see what we can do with that over the next few years. Another resolution authorized the extension. We have a company here called Elevate Recoveries, one of our project companies. With COVID, the whole year of COVID, they did really well during that year, but they were afraid they were not going to hit a benchmark. I think they needed 55 positions, and they were actually at less than 55, so they said, can we have another 12 months? Of course, as we did with most of our projects that had a performance agreement with us, that struggled with COVID, the board chose to give them another 12 months, and that they're hitting those performance agreements, so they'll come out fine with those. Finally, another resolution authorizing an incentive for up to $70 to a company called PQD International. PQD is coming in from the Metroplex. They were looking for a building of about 20 to 30,000 square foot. We located a building. It was an existing business, manufacturing business located on Fallon Drive out in Midway Industrial Park. They had about 6 jobs currently. The guy that owned the company had sold the bigger part of the company off to a larger national company, and he retained a manufacturing presence for a couple of products that he made. So PQD negotiated with this gentleman to buy his company, his machinery and equipment, and to keep manufacturing his products. But PQD themselves is a medical device manufacturer, predominantly manufacturing prosthetics. So I think it's going to be a neat company to have with us. They'll do a lot of CNC work. They work with composites, plastics, all kinds of material to make prosthetic devices. And they have a pretty aggressive growth plan. So we're hoping to see what is 8 to 9, or I guess 8 jobs currently. We're hoping to see growing to 20 within a short period of time. And then finally, we presented a first incentive payment of a little over $90,000 to Eternity Technologies. Eternity is the company that came in and occupied, my first year came in and occupied the former Robit facility out off of Fallon Drive, that 40,000 square foot building that was purchased by some local investors here. Robit was moving out of that building and Eternity Technologies. They manufacture electric batteries for electric forklifts. So they had a tough time. Their machinery was coming out of Germany during the COVID year, so they had a tough time getting delayed. But they finally are up and running and producing product. We went out and toured that facility before we handed them the check, and they're in growth mode. They're already looking for some more space to do manufacturing in. Our plans for the next quarter. One of the bullet points in your document says we will close on 10.33 acres. I closed that at the title company last week. This is a roughly 10-acre tract that's located between Kaiser Aluminum and Tyson, just off of Howe Drive. I think it's the corner of Dorset and Howe. That tract was owned by an individual that was has a foreign company, so it was actually out of Mexico. He had contacted us midway through last year. We weren't really actively looking for more land, especially a small 10-acre tract, but he said, hey, here's the price I'm willing to sell it at, and the board said, yeah, let's pick it up for that. So we did close on that one. We're working with Terrence and Retail Strategies. We're trying to understand a little bit more, when I say understand more about the folks that live in Grayson County but work in Collin County, as well as the folks that live in Collin County and work here. We're working with the consultant to do a geofencing around certain locations in Sherman and Collin County, and trying to understand, who lives here and works there, and vice versa, so that we can target those individuals to say, hey, if there are jobs here, and you're currently living here but working there, what would it take to get you to, get a job here? And vice versa, if they're living in Collin County but driving here every day, how do we get you to convert to move here? So we're trying to understand what that demographic is, and this geofencing data it's really interesting what they can pull. I mean, it's still fairly new, so there's still more of an art than a science, but it is interesting to see the level of detail that they can pull, the demographic detail that they can pull with these studies. So we're going to continue to work with them to do that. I'm still continuing to try to get back into business and industry, doing my retention visits. A lot of our companies, especially the larger folks, still maintain their COVID protocols, allowing very few visitors to come in, really only necessary. But some of the industries are opening up, saying, yeah, it's okay if it's just me coming into the plant. So I want to get back into that routine and keep trying to understand where they're going, what their capital budgets are, and where we can plug in as in a partnership with them. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. Our staff is working very diligently on a video that kind of spans the whole history of Sherman, from our very early industrial days back in the 1800s all the way through when Sedco was established in '96, and then since Sedco's inception, So I know they've done a lot of work, and I really applaud their effort. They're here tonight, doing a lot of work on that, visiting libraries, visiting archives of the newspaper, as well as interviewing some folks that have been around, especially back during the period. So that's exciting. I'm anxious to see what they develop on that. The ShermanTXJobs.com website that we maintain, we're going to keep contacting those companies and getting updates for their listings. Down the last one, I'll stop here. These few bullet points. We're currently working on 5 active projects with an estimated $900 million in capital investments and approximately 4,700 jobs. As most of you know, I'm kind of, I guess I'm old in the game, but I still call that tire kickers. You know, some EDC director will be up here and we're close to closing this deal. So we're not close to closing. They've just indicated an interest. But we have had 1 site visit and 2 prospect meetings. So that's when we get closer to when a company actually calls back in response to a proposal we sent and said, or a site consultant says, hey, we like what you put in the proposal. Can you tell us more about it? Or especially when they come make a visit, then we feel more confident that they're narrowing down the search. Our staff launched a marketing campaign targeting approximately 50 California companies. In my evaluation last year, one of the things that came up was, can we expand our marketing resources beyond the Dallas-Fort Worth marketing team, the governor's office, and the site consultants? So we found out about a service called Gazelle AI, artificial intelligence. Economic development agencies are starting to use this service. It's basically they have a database of over 1 million companies worldwide. They contact these companies. There's also some artificial intelligence, some algorithm components to it. And basically they can say, these 100 companies in California with 250 or 500 employees or less are really, they are probably going to move, either relocate or expand their operations within the next 12 to 18 months. So we're still in the infancy. We've had it's kind of a little bit buggy, but we've had multiple conversations with the company. They're working through it with us. So I'm cautiously optimistic that that's going to be a good tool for us to develop and use as we learn it more. Let's see. Finally, I guess the last thing I'll end with this. I'm on a state board, and we had a conference call with several EDCs in the governor's office. There were a couple of state agencies a couple of months ago after the calamity that was the winter storm came through. And sort of the goal of that call was to talk to some corporate real estate people out there in the world, site consultants, and say, hey, how badly was our image, our reputation damaged? Now that the whole world saw, our sort of our Achilles heel with the grid. And the answer we got back was it wasn't as bad as what I thought some of us thought could have been, but they said, as long as you can answer questions that the companies have, and you're going to have them, and we have had them since the storm when we've had talks with companies and site consultants. You need to be able to answer those questions. What happened in your community specifically? What were the challenges that happened in Sherman? And what are you doing to prevent those challenges in the future? In response to that, Robbie and myself, Councilman Teeman, put together what private industry kind of pushed this work group to be put together, but we met with a couple of our industries at Austin College. Robbie gave a really good background on what happened, during the storm, what the city is doing to work through those issues, and we've got some things that we're reporting back to the industry. So we're trying to stay ahead of that, on top of that, and take instead of a reactive approach, take a proactive approach. So, SEDCO will continue to work with the city and however we can plug in to be a part of that solution. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions you guys have.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been busy.
Right, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Ken.
All right, media questions tonight. Okay. None? All right, council comments. Did I start with you last time?
I don't remember, but I have no comment.
Okay.
Well, I have a couple of comments, and one is that in the, when you were talking about all the water stuff that's come up, I'm sure probably a number of you, if not everyone in here, received a mailing regarding water pipe insurance. And that is if you haven't gotten it, I'm sure you probably will. I don't know, it just came to our house. But I just want to make a point that, I'm sure this is because of our problems with our pipes freezing. And I hope that Nate will maybe put something out, are you with me? That you really don't need, that's a personal choice. If you want to buy pipe insurance for your home and stuff, but I'm afraid we have a lot of seniors, citizens and individuals who won't know exactly what that is, and after what has happened, they may be willing to jump on this as far as being able to buy, water pipe insurance to protect you from breakage and things like that. So that kind of concerned me. And also in talking about jobs, there was someone who on Facebook the other day asked about, I just moved to Sherman, are there any jobs available? Does anybody know of a job? And I counted up over 100 jobs that were mentioned in the Sherman-Denison area, and none of them were minimum wage. And several of them indicated, I can start you this afternoon if you want a job. So Sherman is prime for individuals who want jobs, and most of them were in, like the 10 to 12 to up to $15 an hour type thing, but it was nice to see that. But when people say, I can't find a job, everybody is posting, and there are lots of jobs out there. If you want a job, you can get a job. Thank you.
Remind us of the website, ShermanTXJobs.com. Okay. Thank you, Ken.
I don't have anything there.
Well, I just wanted to applaud our engineering guys for working on the water and the water department team there, for getting out and working on the brine system and also the new water lines that we had going in tonight. Those are going to be tremendous for the city as far as new development and making it possible for more development in residential homes, including the 20-inch water line that we did tonight. That's a big deal to start making housing a little bit more affordable in Sherman. It's hard to make housing affordable when you have less than 2 months of inventory on the market. So anything that we can do to put more houses on the ground is good things. We appreciate your work on that.
No comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Just a few announcements this evening. Don't forget, the next council meeting, we will be back in council chambers. Coming up this weekend, April 24th, downtown Sherman Now is going to be doing the huge sidewalk sale around the courthouse square. More than 25 businesses will be involved. Come out, and starts at 9 a.m. That'll be fun. Also this Saturday, Sherman Parks and Rec will host their annual Touch a Truck event at the Congrove Park. The event will be held between 10 and 2, and it's always free. So y'all grab the kiddos and come on out and touch a truck. That's a neat event. The next Coffee with the Mayor will be held on May 7th at Douglas Distributing. We'll have some excellent live local music on hand, as well as our usual networking and community announcements. Come join us. We are going to have live entertainment, so y'all come out for that. Finally, tonight, be sure and get your tickets for Craft the Night Away on June 19th. This event's one of Sherman's largest gatherings of the year. It's another great way to support our growing historic central business district. So y'all keep an eye on Craft the Night Away. Okay, the City Council will now hold a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Open Meetings Act at Section 551.071 to consult with the city attorney to receive legal advice regarding wastewater treatment agreement dated November 2nd, 2009, to receive legal advice regarding the city's response to severe winter weather that occurred in February 2021. So at 6:08, we will go into executive session. Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. We'll make it happen.